we didn't listen to the skeptics that said, well, it's $500,000 to raise each child. We just thought, well, I guess we better get to work.
Welcome to episode 1 of the Brighter and Brighter Success podcast, where we highlight financial and family success in our community. For episode 1, I have an absolute treat where I get to interview my parents, Stephen and Valerie Peterson. In this episode, we talk about the fundamentals of building a home and building a family, as we highlight the last 50 years of Steve and Val's life of building a home of 7 children and an actual home here in Highland, Utah. So I'm so excited for me to introduce my mother and father, Steve and Valerie Peterson. I hope you enjoy this episode. As we start this conversation, in some of our pre-conversation for today, we shared a lot of stories about the last 40 years. I'm 41, so I've been in your life for 41 years, right? So over the last 41 years, there's been a lot of intentional, heartfelt, spiritual effort that the both of you have put in to building your family and creating an environment of love and acceptance and progression. And so for that, I'm really excited to have this conversation and for all of our listeners to be able to share some insights and stories from your life. So thank you again. Mm-hmm. So as we start off, Dad, I wonder if you can kind of just share with us a little bit of your background professionally, and then Mom, I'll maybe have you share a little bit about the background of our family, kind of the dynamics and how many kids we have and what we've been up to. Mm-hmm. But Dad, do you just want to kind of start off, give us a little background professionally of where?
Oh, sure. I went on my mission, Michigan, Indiana mission. When I got home from that, I went to BYU and had a hard time figuring out what I was going to do, what kind of major, and everybody runs into that situation. What am I going to do with my life? And through a series of testing, checking different majors out, I ended up really liking the construction management area with emphasis on design and architecture. And I thought, this is something that I really can get into. And so I did major in construction management and graduated in 1975. I shouldn't have said that. That's kind
just
of
a few years ago.
Kind of a long time ago.
Sure.
But anyway, I had the opportunity to work with various contractors in the Provo area, and just after that, we had got engaged, and one of our projects that we did, we went to Alaska. When we were first married, I had a construction company that offered me a job in Anchorage, and so I moved up there, worked there for a year, and came back and back to Utah County and worked there. And so anyway, basically, we've lived in Utah County all of our life in several different homes, and we'll talk about that today of what we've done. But construction management, starting out working with general contractors, just working on the job site, and then a manager, general manager, and worked my way up. And I'll talk to you a little bit about several of those. But I guess it was a progression, and you have to think, okay, when you're just working for not very much money, what am I going to do? How am I going to save some money for the future? Because the future and retirement looks like a long ways away.
Sure.
But we set up some 401ks, and our employers helped us a little bit to get along with that. I guess the hardest thing was budgeting, especially when the kids came along. So maybe Valerie can talk a little bit about how our life went and what we did for kids.
Sure, yeah. Brief comment on your background. I often tell people that I was raised with a hammer in this hand and a screwdriver in this hand, because ever since we were small, I'm the middle child of 7. And so my older brothers and my older siblings and my younger siblings were all really involved. And that's, I think, going to be part of our conversation today. But I really love and appreciate my upbringing in a household that was very physical and creative. I really appreciated that. Like, opportunity and environment to learn more about myself and to learn a lot about work ethic. So a lot of really great things that I feel like I benefit from because of your more physical construction type of background. So Mom, your primary job was raising these 7 hoodlums, these scallywags, right? So tell me a little bit about your side of the story and a little bit about our family.
Well, I will tell you this, it was a journey of faith. We had 7 children. That was a large family. Even, I mean, there were people that had 7 and 8 children, but smaller families as well. But every one of those came into our home with us knowing that that's where they were supposed to be. And so we didn't listen to the skeptics that said, well, it's $500,000 to raise each child. We just thought, well, I guess we better get to work. And Dad worked really hard and I worked really hard. You know, I love the homemaking skills. I love to bake and cook and sew and all of those things. And then when the kids got to the point that they could assist and do those things, we just taught them how to do that. And that's just what we did.
Yeah, awesome. And with 7 children, what kind of challenges or what kind of blessings do you feel like that brought as a mother, kind of raising this very active family? Tell me a little bit more about just all the dynamics of raising 7 children.
Well, I must have had a lot more energy then than I do now because
right.
I look back and I go, that wouldn't be happening today, but obviously I had energy there, and I just, when you know that that's what you're supposed to do, you just wake up every morning and go and do it. I mean, the older they got, they could help the younger ones, but probably the biggest blessing was Steve was all in. When he came home at 5 o'clock at the end of the day, that was my favorite time of the day because it was like I got a breather, and he was there to help. I couldn't have done it by myself. And it was teamwork.
And Dad must have also had more energy back then, because I remember Dad coming home and you giving us horsey rides like all over the living room.
Yeah.
Right? You'd get down on all 4s and we would jump on your back and you would buck and bronco us through the living room or up the stairs or out and around. And we just, as kids, we just thought that was so great that Dad was willing to come home. I love your words, Mom, saying that Dad was all in. I felt like I had an all in dad as well. For you to show up after a very physical day of work and then be willing to roughhouse with all of us to kind of show your love for all of us. I actually feel like that's the one thing that I've learned about your type of love is I'm very physical with my children. I love to like grapple them and squeeze them and lift them and throw them up in the air. So I think I learned that's one way that you show love. And so that's awesome.
Yeah. He always had a smile on his face when he walked in the door and he said, so what are we doing tonight?
Yeah. One full-time job to the next, huh?
Yeah.
But it was not all fun and games either. We had fun and games, and then there was always, okay, it's time for the project. Let's go over to the neighbor's house. They need me to finish their basement. So I'd say, okay, let's see. Holly, Brian, let's go. We're going over. We got to get this basement cleaned up so we can get these walls built. So it seemed like all the way through you guys' growing up years, there was always a neighbor or some friends or family that needed something built. And since I was the construction guy, they're always asking me what to do and what they needed to do. And I said, oh, okay, I can do that. So I used all you kids. You were my laborers. We went over and did all these projects for people all the time. And that's, I think, you guys didn't even know it, but you were learning work ethic when we did that.
Yeah. Yeah, not to mention, I remember a lot of times you inviting me or Barrett or Brian to come join you at the work site, right? For the majority of my upbringing, you were building church buildings And so there was a lot of square footage to sweep after some contractors would come and put in the electrical or put in some boards or something like that. So I remember a lot of Saturdays, you inviting us, because we didn't have school, you inviting us to work, and you said, okay, here's a quarter of this large building. This needs to be swept by the time lunchtime comes around. And we would obviously complain and drag our feet a little bit, but you asked us to do it, right? The spirit of work work ethic was alive in our home. That's something that you had mentioned, Mom, earlier. And so that was actually, looking back now, some of those work opportunities to be shoulder to shoulder or side by side with you definitely taught me a lot of work ethic. And I actually appreciate sweeping the kitchen now every night after dinner, because I feel like I've done it so many times, and it's kind of been a source of joy for me.
Yeah, now I can look back over the years, and now you guys are much older. You have your own families, and when something goes wrong with you guys' sink, do you call a plumber?
No.
You want to remodel, cut a hole in a wall, put a little patchwork. Do you call a contractor? No, you know how to do it yourself.
And they don't even have to call you. They learn to do it themselves.
Well, we still borrow your tools. You are our tool depot.
Half my tools are lend out.
That's true.
You definitely call for advice, and that's kind of nice. And you'll say, yeah, that's what I thought I should do. I just checking to make sure if that's what we should do.
Just checking to make sure I'm not electrocuting myself or going to flood my whole house if I do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
That is great. And I think that's kind of a perfect segue into this next part of our conversation that I'm just dying to have, because I think there's so many good stories and correlation to like family that we can pull out of this. But back in 1990, there were there's some big changes that happened in the Peterson family. And so, Mom, do you maybe want to share a little bit about like what led up to this idea of building a home for our family?
Okay. So our first home, obviously we didn't build, but we did add on when we got a few more kids, and we wanted a little bit bigger kitchen, hangout area and stuff. But we were expecting number 7, and we had the 5 boys and 1 girl. And we thought, okay, if we have a girl, we got plenty of bedrooms. If we have a boy, that might not work. So we kind of had a family conversation out in the backyard on a hammock and just said, hey kids, because by then Brian, our oldest, was 14, and that's kind of a hard time to move. And so we had that conversation about, well, what do you think? And everybody was all in. Some of the little kids might not have totally understood it, but they were excited about it. And so we put our house on the market. We put it in the newspaper. Back then, people would advertise in the newspaper.
Easy.
And the day it came out, there was 2 people at our house fighting over it, and one of them just put a check on the mantle and said, well, this is my deposit. And
wow.
And so we thought, okay, I guess the house is sold. So, but prior to that, we had found a lot up in Highland, and so that started our journey, and we moved to Pleasant Grove and started attending our ward in Highland and the schools in Pleasant Grove, the junior high and Manila Elementary, which I think you were in.
That was my 2nd grade year.
So, yeah.
Right.
And then we drove to Highland every day after work and school to work on the house. And we did that for 9 months, every day after school and on Saturday.
So your 7th child was on the way. And
Kyle in the preliminary, he had been born. So he was just a few months when we moved.
So you have 7 children, and you realize we need to do something different because we were crowding the small house in Provo.
Yeah. And your dad had always wanted to build his own house.
Yeah. And so my experience of this home building event in our family was quite exciting, right? About how many months did it take for you to build the house, Dad?
Well, it took 9 months. Most of the work was done by me, my father-in-law, and a few friends that came over, and the kids. This was a a family project to build this house.
Mhm.
I had a couple of people that did some odds and ends for me at the end because I was basically worn out.
Sure.
Someone did your brick. Your college
Bricklayer.
professor and electrician
Did
did the
electrician.
electrical, and then the bricklayer did the brick. But I think that was all.
But other than that, you were the general, and you did a lot of the labor.
So that was 9 months, every night, every Saturday, for 9 months. That was our family project.
So nights and Saturdays, not weekdays, because you still had a full-time job, right?
No weekdays.
And he only had 2 weeks vacation from work, so he couldn't even really do that. So
Wow. So there's a couple of experiences or stories together as a family that we look back now with a lot of appreciation for that hard work. I want to share a couple. So like you had mentioned, I was in 2nd grade, and so this was a family activity where we would come home from school every day, and Dad would come home from work, we'd eat dinner, and then we just knew that we were going to go get in the truck and head on up the road from PG to Highland to work for the rest of the night into the dark hours, and then come home and go to bed, right? Mm-hmm. And so me and my older siblings, I don't think all the younger ones went every time, but me and my older siblings would go up, and we would ride in the back of your little pickup truck. I don't know if that was the Isuzu Pup at the back of the day. Probably was. So no seat belts, of course. This was the early 90s. But we would jump into the back of Dad's truck and drive up there, and we were so excited to get there and either work on our little wood projects that we were building out in the front yard with the scrap wood, or get excited to go check some of our golf ball traps in like the creek that was right next to the golf course by our house. And so I remember several times jumping out of the back of your truck before you had even parked the car, and several of those times, like slipping on the gravel and falling on, getting big skins on my knees and being bloody even before we started our work night. And so you and your patients would pull over and be like, remember kids, don't get out of the truck before it's actually stopped. But you would pull out your Band-Aids that you would have in your wallet and put it on our knees and pat us on the back, and then off we would go. So there was a lot of those kind of experiences that I really feel like shaped a lot of our childhood as we built a home together. Mm-hmm. Another experience that I remember was framing well into the night. It was dark, and we were framing the 2nd floor of our house, building the walls on the floor, and then we'd lift them up and prop them in place and then nail them down. And I remember this one particular night, it was dark, but the moon was out, but there was bats flying and flopping all over the upper deck of our house. And me and Holly obviously did not like the bats. She was a little bit more screaming and screeching at those. And then those older brothers were picking them up and trying to put them in Isla's face, right? Or did I say Isla or did I say Holly? Isla's my daughter, Holly's my sister, in like Holly's face. But I remember that experience also was like this surreal feeling of looking around, and this is all of our family, maybe Grandpa Ray, Dad, brothers, building these walls and lifting them up and putting them in place late at night. And just remember kind of feeling like a sense of pride as a family that we were building something together as a family. Yeah. I know there's another story about concrete till 3 a.m. Maybe you can kind of tell that.
Oh, that is one of the horror stories.
Okay.
Concrete it gives me nightmares still. How many years have I not poured concrete, and I still have nightmares about concrete? But anyway, we poured our garage floor, and there was a little chance of rain, but we thought we got to get it poured. So Brian and I had worked on it. Some people came. I think it was just our neighbors came and helped us screed the concrete. We got it all leveled out, got it all finished, troweled, and it was looking beautiful. And we saw these rain clouds coming over from Salt Lake. We thought, oh, I hope this is okay. But it was getting pretty firm. We thought this concrete's going to be fine if it happened to rain. Well, the rain came and it just pounded, one of those storms like we had the other day. It just pounded and it beat the top of that concrete off. And this was like 10 o'clock. And then we thought, oh no. So we waited till the rain stopped. We got to fix this. Then I had some bags of cement powder. And so we went out on the concrete and we worked it and we worked it and we got it the best we could. And it was about 3 o'clock before we finally got it halfway decent to finish.
Mm.
And that was really hard. And it didn't look very good for a lot of years until just a few years ago. I had somebody come in and put a nice, these painted floors on it, covered it all up, and now it's just
now it's just a memory.
Yeah.
Now it's just a memory.
Yeah, we had several light nights like that.
Oh, that is so great. That is so great. But this experience of building a home together as a family, I don't know of very many, if any, other families that have actually experienced that together, right? So looking back to 1990, all these years ago, 34 years ago, how do you feel like that experience together as a family kind of framed the upbringing of not only building a home or a house, but also building a home and a family?
Yeah.
How do you feel like that kind of set the tone or the cadence or the lessons to raise your family or build your family?
Well, I think the kids think of the wealth of knowledge that they learned just through that experience, but then an appreciation for what we actually had. I remember sitting around the bar,
Kitchen.
the island in the kitchen with everyone, and Barrett piping up and saying, you know what, and he wasn't very old, I think he was 10, and he said, Mom, we wouldn't have had this house if Dad hadn't built it, because we wouldn't have been able to afford it. And in his little mind, he could see the sense of what hard work had produced, as opposed to just trying to go out and buy something out in the world. And then another cute story is just in the process of building, there happened to be 2 piles of sand in the backyard. And you guys love sandbox. Sandbox, Provo were a big deal, and it was going to be a big deal here in Highland. And I don't know why there ended up being 2 piles, but one of the neighborhood boys, there was a lot of boys your kids' age, and one of them went home that night and told his parents, the Petersons are so wealthy. They have 2 sandboxes.
Nice.
And it's just it's just interesting to see what these little minds, the things that they learn and comprehend as opposed to just, you definitely were a little bit more in the know, you kids, of what we were doing. With that many kids growing up, it was like, okay, this paycheck, just wait till the next paycheck. You can have your new shoes or your new boots or whatever, or a new coat or whatever. It just wasn't a given that, I want something, or even I need something, that it just happens overnight. And I think that's value to know. I think there will come a day where all of us are going to have to, okay, what do we really need? Or is it just a want? And we're just going to have to make that distinction. And so I think those principles are very valuable to learn at a young age. When the time comes to budget, you understand budgeting, because there is a big difference between, we need this. And, we never felt poor at all. We felt blessed. We had Heavenly Father. When Dad needed work, it was there. It came when we needed it. We were doing our part, and He was sending manna from heaven. So even though we went without things that we might have wanted for a period of time, we always had what we needed.
I think that value of learning, what can a dollar buy? It can buy shoes. It can go out to dinner. What do you want to do? And is it more important? Which is more important? And I remember in those early days that the paycheck could come in, and Val and I would talk about what we needed to buy and how we could get everything organized. And I just remember the thrill. If I could have $5 left in my wallet for the 2 weeks, I just felt like I was so lucky.
Wow. Because there was a lot of places that each paycheck got divvied up into. A lot of mouths, a lot of needs, some wants, but mostly needs.
Yeah.
Right. Those are great. Like, to kind of repeat what I'm hearing, which is amazing. So principles that you feel like started with the building of this house, and it was maybe really exemplified in the building of this house, is work ethic, like learning that if you are able to put in the work, like Barrett had said, put in the work, you can have something greater than you if you wouldn't put in the work, right? And then an appreciation of the value of money, the appreciation of what it can buy, the perspective of choosing one or the other, right? And kind of that more prudent, understanding, grounded perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you got to remember, these are the days that you didn't put food on a credit card. That if you went to the grocery store, you had to have cash, and or a check.
That wasn't allowed.
Or a check. It was not allowed to buy food with a credit card because they knew that you might not pay it back.
Because you just ate it.
There was no debt. There was you couldn't have any debt, and we stayed out of debt. We didn't pay interest. We didn't believe.
I remember
in interest.
one time, early in our marriage, I think we bought sheets or something, and we put them on a credit card because I wanted some new bed sheets. And I remember the next month paying for those bed sheets, and I only could pay like just a little, well, maybe half of it, and I had to pull it over to the next paycheck. And I remember not liking that feeling. I'm paying for something that's already old. And I thought, oh, I'm never doing that again. I want to pay for something that is new at that point, and pay and not have any thought that I've got to even revisit that issue again. And stuff. But
yeah, that's definitely a norm that has been lost in modern day society, right? I didn't know that you couldn't put food on credit. That makes sense, right? You can have credit for a car or a house because there's actually something there of tangible value the next day. Where food, you ate it, it's gone.
Yeah.
I'm going to share that with my kids. I think that's quite insightful. I would love to kind of drill in a little bit more and ask you a couple more questions about this work ethic, because I think, me personally, if I think back to my own experience and what you're sharing, I really feel like I've gathered or gained a huge gift of work ethic because of how you raised me. And so where did this work ethic start, right? Obviously, the both of you are integrating and teaching your children that through the building of a house, right? But maybe share with me a little bit about where you learned your own work ethic. What's kind of the foundation or the genesis of that?
Being able to work. My dad worked for the State Fish and Game, Wildlife Management, and he was not in construction at all. And in fact, he didn't do very much because his parents did not teach him anything about construction either. So I'm kind of like, I learned this of what I like to do. But my dad worked really hard in the things that he knew how to do, taking care of the fish hatchery where he worked, and making sure that the employees were taken care of, and that he was a good hard worker. And I saw that, and I just had the inner feeling that whatever I was asked to do, I needed to follow through it. If I committed to do something, I would do it. And that carried over. Then when I got into college and then learned more about construction, and I learned how to do a few more things, people would ask me to do things, and I would write up a simple little contract with them that this is what I agreed to do. And I worked my hardest to make sure that that got done. And then as time went on, I realized the faster I do a project, the sooner I could get going on another project, and I'd be able to make more money. And there was times that I said, I am going to get this project done by Saturday night if it kills me, because I know there's going to be another project coming. And sure enough, Sunday, somebody had called, say, I've got a little project. I wonder if you could come help me with this. And that happened over and over and over. There was always another project waiting for me when I got one done.
That's incredible.
And so it was kind of a self-motivated thing, having faith that there was going to be another project coming along. Same thing when we were building the churches. That in my career, I built 17 different churches, and we worked with my boss. We worked as hard as we could, getting that building done as fast as we could, because we knew that there was going to be another one coming. Just had the faith that it was going to come, and it did.
Yeah, that's great.
And I think that it's good for the kids, but it was also a little bit of a detriment, because Valerie suffered a little bit, because I would say I was coming home at 6 o'clock and I just got a little bit more to do, so I had to stay till 7. And then she got mad.
It was more like coming home at 9 or 10.
So that is a little drawback of having that characteristic.
That's awesome.
But I'm grateful. I like that he's, when he starts something, he finishes it. Like if we started, he doesn't ever say, "Oh, I'm tired of doing this. Let's wait till tomorrow." I mean, it was like, for me, I liked it that we could get things cleaned up and start fresh the next day. My growing up experience a little bit different. My dad had his own business. I grew up on a dairy farm in Montana, and 7 kids as well. And my dad, from the very beginning, felt like, well, if my kids can do what a hired hand can do, then my kids are going to do it. And he would pay us what he would pay someone else. So all of us, and he kept track on a ledger, all of our money and everything, and then we could just draw it out whenever we wanted. And so I worked really hard. I milked cows 3 days a week. I got up early in the morning before early morning seminary. I milked cows, and then I went to seminary at 6:30. And then in the summer, I bucked hay and changed sprinkler pipes. I was able to earn enough money in the summer to pay for my time at Rick's College. I would make it till March, and then I'd run out of money. But I had enough money till then. But that's the work ethic that I was raised with. My dad was very generous and very complimentary and very encouraging that we could do hard things. One summer, a friend of his reached out and said, "Can I borrow your daughter? Can I hire her to change some sprinkler pipes?" And I went and did that, and it about killed me. But knowing how it made it doable for me, knowing that he knew that he was going to get a job well done, and I didn't want to disappoint him. So sometimes doing hard things, sometimes it's just simply because you just want to keep faith that you'll do what you said you would do and not give up. And so we're kind of crazy that way.
Sure.
Even now, we can't really sit still too much, but
sure.
I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's amazing. I look at each one of our siblings, my siblings, your children, and I see how these principles that you've talked about have showed up in their lives, that have enriched and blessed their life's experience and their families, and now even to the next generation, kind of seeing that pass on to the next generation. So that's incredible. So as we kind of, expand a little bit this conversation of building a home and building a family, I would love to kind of challenge the conversation again a little bit more and say, now fast forward 34 years, right? It's been 34 years since you built that home and your children are raised and now have families of their own. So looking back over that last 34 years, what do you feel like has been your greatest challenge of raising a family and having, in your mind, family success, right? And maybe you can kind of start there. What is your definition of finding success in your family? We've talked a lot about financially and stuff like that, but what does family success mean to you? And what do you feel like has been your greatest challenge and the opposite, greatest joy in that experience?
I think the greatest challenge is giving them a firm foundation to let them then go out into the world and be the kind of people that not only I would like them to be, but their Heavenly Father would like them to be, and really make the most of the gifts that they've been given. And so, and the challenges are different, whether they're young or teenagers or older, but it all kind of has a common denominator. When they were little kids, trying to get them up in the morning and have scripture study, try to build a house of faith that they know that there's a higher power that can help them. When their parents aren't around, there's someone else that's always there for them. So just seeing them go through that growth, and that's a challenge. They're all different. You don't teach the same way because everybody has a different personality. And so that was something we learned. We didn't know growing. But just getting them to where that they can go out in the world and they can be, dependable, outstanding adults that can do good in the world. And the greatest joy then would be the sum of all of that is when you see them make good decisions. And not all of them decisions, they wouldn't all maybe do it the same way we would do it. But if it's the same result and they're still, trusting in their Heavenly Father that everything will be okay even during the difficult times and that they can get through anything. And seeing that played out is probably our greatest choice.
Yeah, that was a big part, besides the work ethic and everything that we did in the home. The big part of it was that spiritual part of it, being able to teach them that there is a God and that there is inspiration from the Holy Ghost and that tithing does work. And we tried to talk about that with their kids, about tithing and how much important it is and what they can do. Everybody has their decision. They can decide to do that or not, but we wanted to set the example of what tithing can do and how it can help out. And so all those things put together, and now I look at all of our kids, you included, good decisions, and everybody is doing the best they can. And we just have some amazing parents that you guys have turned out great. You've married well, and the grandkids, we just love our grandkids to pieces. We have, I just put a little plug in, we have 21 grandkids. And 22 is coming, so we're just so excited. Yeah, it's kind of like we see the joy and happiness that our kids have, and that makes us have joy. And some families have some really tough times that they have to go through. There's so many pitfalls in this world. Satan with all the things that he has, all the little temptations that he has in the world that people can fall into. We just feel very fortunate that our family has been able to avoid many of those really deep, bad pitfalls.
But it's through those experiences will happen to each one of us. But that isn't the issue. The issue is, what do we do when we encounter those experiences? And hopefully they know that we have a strong testimony of our Savior Jesus Christ, and that through him and through this beautiful gospel that everything is possible.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, if we were to sum this up in a principle, I think it would be true to what you've already shared. It would be, financial or physical self-reliance and spiritual self-reliance. Mom, as I hear you kind of say, your greatest challenges and greatest joys of raising your children have been around self-reliance, right? The greatest challenge is letting them be self-reliant or independent, giving them the opportunity to choose for themselves in the big world. And then the joy that comes when they do choose to be self-reliant spiritually and physically. That's really difficult, I'm sure, as a parent, and I can relate because I'm a parent of 5, but I can imagine potentially is even more difficult as you are less and less involved in your children and grandchildren's daily lives.
Yeah.
Right? Because you do have to step away, you do have to surrender, you do have to trust and give that over to God, that He will continue to be in their life. Because really, He was their father first,
Yeah.
right? Mm-hmm. You had the amazing opportunity to be a central part of all of our upbringing as a father and a mother, and have made your hand known, your teachings known. But we were all His first. And I think as He continues to help us learn to be self-reliant, that can be the greatest challenge or joy as a parent, is to learn when to step in, when to step away, and then celebrate all along the way with them.
At this point in our life, we just, like you alluded to, there's a time where you step away, but the influence doesn't go away. We recognize that we still have influence by the way we live our life. And so that's what we try to do every day, is just live our life so that our posterity can see what true joy can be when you make good decisions. Mm-hmm. So
it's incredible. Well, as we kind of wrap up this conversation, this podcast is really all about celebrating in you, right? Mm-hmm. Thinking back over the last 20, 30, 40 years and appreciating the financial and family success that you've had. And so as we kind of wrap up this conversation, I just wanted to kind of point out that family success and financial success looks differently to everyone, right? I loved your previous comment to say, like, when you said, we never felt poor, right? Because your definition of financial success was grounded, and it was balanced. You had all that you needed. Dad, you felt blessed to have $5 extra in your pocket. Not that $5 could really take you on an exotic vacation or buy you something fancy, but you knew that you had a surplus, right? So in your definition of financial success, you were there, right? I love that. And then in your definition of family success is different for everyone as well.
Yeah, right.
But looking back over the last many, many decades of raising your family and building a house and a home, I believe you could honestly say, like, you've had immense family success. Wouldn't you say so? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I
could honestly say that my life is better than I could have ever imagined it. When I was a teenager thinking about going off to college and getting married and having a family, I could have never imagined that it would be this good, even through the difficulties, because at the end of the day, it's the joys of getting through those that are really left in our memories.
Yeah, just talking about those difficulties, maybe we could just touch a little bit about our family's financial crisis that we had to go through.
Yeah.
You're just talking about in 2001, what happened with the Twin Towers and all that, and that caused on some recession. And in 2002, I was let go from my job. I was working with a big construction company, and they said, well, we don't have that many jobs. Sorry, you're going to have to go. And so that was like, what do you do when you come home and you say, we don't have a job in 2 weeks, we're out. And believe it or not, here you go, blessings come. My neighbor across the street had me come over and do a few little things for him. And a few weeks before that, he had said, we're planning on this major remodel. Do you have any ideas, some contractors that I could get a hold of that could help me with this remodel? I said, I don't know anybody that could do that, but I can help you with a couple little things if you want. Anyway, so I'm thinking, I won't have a job. Maybe I can help with this one. So I talked to him about arranging to do the remodel that he'd planned, which is a major remodel onto his house. And so I got going on that. I hired employees and just started my business. And then in the background, I'm thinking, oh, I've got to get a job. I've got to get a real job. And so I kept putting in my resume for other companies, and nothing was happening. And I'm doing this little side job. And then more people called me. And after a year, I said, okay, I got to get my contractor's license. I got to just get going and have my own business, as scary as it is. I don't have anybody paying me. I just paying myself. And so from that point on, that was in 2002, that since then I've had my own business, and we grew as big as we wanted to be. We had all the work we needed, and
no advertising.
no
all we had
advertising.
to
But
do-
so we didn't use any advertising. Sorry,
No marketing.
All we had to
no
do,
marketing.
all we had to do is wonder. We'd have a conversation at the end of the day. Wonder, when this ends, what's the next job? Because, self-employed people, employment can run out pretty quickly. But it never did. Someone would call as soon as we asked that question out loud. Someone would call.
Yeah.
And
No, it's scary times, and it really is. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there wondering, what are you going to do for the next paycheck?
But this is the miracle of what happened through that really difficult experience. I mean, we cried and cried and cried. It was so painful. But the miracle of it is the things that we actually had on our vision board for our future would have never come to pass if he was working for another person. And so Heavenly Father had to make that happen and pushed him out on his own, and everything that we dreamed of wanting to do or doing that took finances came because of that experience. And so we really need to ask ourselves when we're going through difficult things, what is the perk of this going to be? Because nothing happens, just everything happens for a reason, I believe.
And oftentimes it's in the environment of uncertainty.
Yeah, that you have your greatest growth.
A humbleness of heart.
Yeah.
Or open mind, open heart, that inspiration is more clear than ever.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I hear when I hear that experience. Sometimes you just need a little bit of a nudge.
And our bishop was a construction lawyer, and he offered to put together all the paperwork for the business for free. He organized all that. I mean, to start a business, you need all that kind of stuff, and that was one thing he hadn't done in his background. And so the miracle to us, that was a miracle that Heavenly Father was very aware of the specifics of every stage of our life. So
I think I appreciate you bringing that up, Dad, because that is a good place to kind of summarize our conversation again about success in finances, success in the family, and how integrated they both really truly are, because they together is what teaches us those principles that we talk about today. And that's why I love this conversation. And that's why I'm excited for this podcast, is as we together see how integrated both of those areas of our life are. And if they are balanced and focused, how we can live amazing and grateful and humble and brighter lives.
Definitely grateful.
So thank you so much for our conversation today. Thank you for showing up as my amazing parents and guests on our podcast. And I'm excited for many, many people to be able to learn from your examples.
thank you.
Thank
so
you
much
for inviting.
Yep.